All right, well, good morning, church. Good morning. Good morning. Good to be with you guys. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for, as a church, being so supportive to our mission of Young Life. For those of you that don't know, I lead the mission of Young Life here locally. I'm the director, and this church has been partnering with us. You guys have been partnering with us to reach kids for Christ. So thank you. It's always a privilege to be able to share the word of truth, especially right now during Easter time. It's just a privilege to be able to share with you guys. Our main text today is going to be John 11. We're going to begin in about verse 28, and they've given me the task of completing the chapter, which is a lot of verses, in 30 minutes. It's a tough thing, but that's my work, right? To be able to not skip things, but to cover the subject and be able to bring out the things that God is saying through this chapter. So my job is to do that. And so I wanted to prepare our hearts before we get into John 11:28. Prepare our hearts with a couple of scriptures that were in my heart for us this morning, and then we'll pray and get into our text this morning. So the first one is Psalm 90:10. 90:10. It'll be on the screen. It'll be in the ESV, in case you're wondering. This is Moses who wrote this, and he says, the years, but more importantly is the Holy Spirit, the years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength, 80. Yet their span is but toil and trouble, and they are soon gone, and we fly away. And that just speaks to our frailty as humans. There was a time in my past when I thought I was strong and I knew what I was doing. Some of you guys have seen me limp around church earlier because I was playing with the youngsters this week. Volleyball, and so my foot's all swollen. I can't even put my sock on, man. Come on. But, life is frail. We could be here today. We could be gone tomorrow. Even those of us that feel like we're healthy right now, those things can happen, right? There's some of us that are going through a lot more than a busted up ankle, right? And so life is frail. And in light of that, I want you to think of the words that Jesus said even last week through the message and through Pastor Lewis that he preached. In verse 25, he says to Martha, I'm the resurrection and the life. Like, I'm resurrection life now, not just later, now. And that's available to frail people. And he also said in John 5, just to remind you, the second verse, John 5:28 and 29, do not marvel at this, for an hour is coming when all who are in the tombs will hear his voice, Jesus' voice, and come out. Those who have done good to the resurrection of life with God forever, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of judgment forever, eternal. Now, imagine the power of God in that, to be able to raise and put these bodies back on all these people and judge everything perfectly. That's power. We're talking about Lazarus today. And some people would say, well, unless he called him by name, Lazarus, all the dead people would have came forth, because he has this type of authority and he has this type of power. Well, because Jesus has been saying, especially here in this chapter, making very clear that he is the resurrection and the life, that's who he is, it's time to prove it. If that's who you're saying that you are, then show us that that's who you are. Well, let me pray, and then we'll see what he does. Father, once again, we are thankful that we get to come together and worship and think about you. Think about ourselves and the frailty of life. We're here today, we're gone tomorrow. We're healthy now, we might not be healthy tomorrow. And that's just the truth. And with our frailty, God, we understand that you're the life giver and that there's power in your name. And so, Lord, this morning, help us to hear your voice. Open our ears so that we can hear you. Open our eyes so that we can see you. Give us empowerment by your Spirit so that we can do the things that you're calling us to, the things that hinder us and the things that have us stuck, that your power would come today and that you would give us breakthrough. Give us your blessing in full measure. Don't hold anything back from us today, God. We need you. In Christ's name, amen. All right, guys. Well, let me set the scene a little bit before we jump into verse 28. Let me set the scene. I'm going to break it up into 3 texts so it's not so heavy all the way down. But before I go into verse 28, let me set the scene. Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. Okay? So first 7 days in their culture, full of mourning. Everybody's mourning. Everybody's crying, wailing, right? And many people are there. It seemed to be a pretty influential family. A lot of people are there. The Jews did not embalm, meaning that they didn't stop the decay of the body like the Egyptians did, right? For instance. And so they would bury their dead the same day, especially when it was hot, right? You got to get that body in the tomb. It's going to stink pretty quick and decay. So they would wrap the body, put oils and spices on it, and that would mitigate the smell that same day, but they would get the body in the grave that day. They would have a procession, however you want to say it, and they would go all that same day, that first day, to the tomb, which was like a cave, and they would put the body there. They wouldn't even eat, right? And then afterwards, they'd come back to the house, all the guests. There was a lot of mourning the first 7 days, like I said. And then after that, it would be like memorial, people eating after that and sharing stories and all that kind of stuff to comfort the family. It was an awesome thing. Death was a very common thing, obviously, in their culture. So that's what's going on. Now, when they buried him and put him like in a cave, kind of like Jesus, the way we know his tomb, they also put a stone. They would put a stone that they would roll there. And that would keep away, obviously, the smell would be kept inside. Also, to note, they would bury their dead outside the village because the Jews had their laws about dead bodies and they didn't have them so close to them. So they would be outside the village. And then that stone was there to keep in the stink, but also to keep away grave robbers, to keep away maybe animals, and, just different things that can come in there. So that's the scenario there. Now, I'm not a pathologist, of course. I watch a little bit of forensic files. My wife and I would. But I did look up a couple of medical things. This is why. Because we're going to see something amazing that Jesus did. But I want you to really understand what was the state of Lazarus 4 days dead. Well, this is what it tells us, okay? Obviously, the heart had already stopped beating. The body cells were deprived of oxygen. They were beginning to die, the cells. Blood was draining down and pulling down. Rigor mortis, where the muscles stiffen after 3 hours. By 24 hours, the body had lost all its heat. Rigor mortis gone, maybe by 3 days, 72 hours. The body begins to soften again after that, and bacteria goes to work. The cells are dying. Decomposition tissue takes on a horrible look and smell. Emission of green liquids. Tissue releases gases like hydrogen sulfide, methane, etc. The smell gets worse and worse. Insects and animals come and eat what's left of the body if it's available to them. So that's where Lazarus finds himself today, in today's text. And remember, there was 2 resurrections in Jesus' life, the boy in the town of Nain, and then also the 12-year-old girl that he raised, but he raised them the same day. Their condition was not this. Some people might even say, well, they weren't completely dead, maybe. Some people could say that, right? Even though it wasn't true, the Bible tells us that they were dead. But here, there's no question. The body was decomposing rapidly. And that's where we find ourselves. Last thing that you need to know before I read verse 28 is the conversation last week was with Martha, one of the sisters. The conversation here, because now Jesus is requesting to speak to the other sister, which is Mary. To me, I believe when I read the scriptures that Mary's the softer one. She's a little softer, and you'll see her come in and getting to the knees, getting on her knees when Jesus comes and the way she approaches her. But they say the same things. If you had been here. Now, there's not a lot of faith in that comment, I don't believe. Because they knew he could heal and all that, but he would heal people sending a word too. Why did he stay? Obviously, it had to have been God's purpose. Lord, you only come at the right time. See, that would have been faith. Lord, if you allowed him to die, then that was your purpose. Your will be done, God. See, that's trust, right? But Lord, if you had been here, that sounds like Martha was influencing her. That she had been saying it, at least in my estimation, based on what I see in Luke 10, right? When you got Mary right there listening to every word while Jesus is teaching and the other one's working. And Jesus affirms that Mary's doing the right thing. Jesus wasn't teaching all the time. But when he was teaching, it's time to listen, right? And that was Mary, I believe. But anyway, let's go to verse 28. Verse 28, it'll be on the screen, and it's on the ESV. So it says, when she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house consoling her saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come in with her also weeping, he was deeply moved, that's Jesus, in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? Why did he allow him to die? See, he's probably alluding to John 9, right? When he healed the man that was blind from birth. And so Jesus again is deeply moved in verse 38. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Now, the Greeks described their gods as apathetic. They weren't able to feel their pain, right? The human's pain. They didn't have much emotion, and they really didn't care. That's kind of the way that they would describe their own gods. Here we see in verse 33 that Jesus is deeply moved. Very strong language. And it speaks of an indignation. He's upset. He's not just sad. He's also upset. And he's stirred up and he's agitated. And it's in the reflexive, so it means that he was deeply troubled within himself. He was deeply troubled within himself, but he was upset. He was agitated and he was angry. And then in verse 35, it says he let it all out. He wept. He burst out into tears. He started sobbing. And then if you look at verse 38, it said that he was deeply moved again. This is a third emotion, deep emotion, right? But this one is different than the first, deeply moved. This one was used in the ancient text to describe a horse that's snorting, like kind of like shuddering, and by this point he's going to the tomb. Because the question is, why is he so angry? Why is he so troubled? Well, is it because of loss? Because he lost his friend Lazarus, who he loved? Yeah, probably loss, but not just that. Sorrow, pain. Maybe even he was upset at some unbelief because people were not believing. And probably by this point, maybe they should have, right? Maybe some of that, possibly, I'm not sure. But for sure, this is what I know he was upset about, for sure. Death itself. Because when he snorted and deeply moved in verse 38, he's coming to the tomb. And he's about to do something about death, which he hates. So think about this, because you also get the word groan. You get the word groan. But think about Jesus coming to the tomb. The image to me is this. like something like that, right? Like a horse snorting, shuddering. But he's about to do something. That's the point. And you know, when we think about groaning, why does creation groan in Romans 8? Because it was subjected into futility by God himself when man sinned. So it can't accomplish its purpose. That's why it groans. Creation groans biblically because it can't accomplish its purpose. It's not supposed to be like this. See, in Romans 8, it also says that we as believers groan. Why do we groan? Because we're still in these bodies. And we know that God has promised something better. And we groan because it's not supposed to be like this. One day, it's all going to change. See? And now we got Jesus right here groaning and getting upset, and death is right there, right in front of him. And he's about to do something about it. Your first fill-in, in case you're following that, I'll give it to you. It won't be on the screen because I'm just going to use the text up there. But the first fill-in is we have a high priest that sympathizes with our weakness. And where did I get that from? Well, Hebrews 4:16 and 17, which says, "For we do not have a high priest," that's Jesus in the heavens, next to the Father, "who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need." See, we're frail. We're just people in this body. And we need God. And he says, hey, Jesus sympathizes with you because he was in a body. And he was hanging on a cross practically naked, being mocked and scorned. He walked among people for 33 years that couldn't understand him, had sinful minds, did sinful things, and he was always doing the right thing. But he had to see it all the time. He had to see sin in front of him day after day after day. And he had to face death like he does here in this chapter. So Jesus understands what it is to walk as a human, but he didn't give in to sin. He's able to help us in our time of need, and he wants us to come to him. So he is our sympathizing high priest. That's why I titled the passage today, "A Sympathetic Power." Sympathetic power. Now, let's keep reading. I'm on verse 39. Let's keep reading, because now he's at the tomb. What is he going to do about death? He's angry about death. What is he going to do? Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Now, nobody wanted that stone rolled away except for Jesus. Everybody there knew that there was a rotten corpse inside of there. Jewish laws, stench, whatever it was, nobody wanted that stone to be rolled away except for Jesus. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" If you go back in chapter 11, verse 4, when they said, "Hey, he's dying, the one that you love is dying," he said, "Hey, this is going to be for the glory of God." And that's why he stays there another 2 years and allows for Lazarus to die. Hey, don't worry, I'm going to let him die because this is going to be for God's glory. This is going to show who God really is. That's why I'm allowing this death. And so he reiterates to Martha, "Didn't I tell you if you believed you were going to see powerful things? Didn't I tell you that this was going to be for the glory of God? Believe." Jesus, here on verse 40, Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believe you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. They removed it. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." Now, why is he praying? See, he's doing it for the people there. See, he wants them to understand that this is from heaven. This comes from God the Father. That the Father and Jesus are one. Jesus didn't come on his own. He didn't come to do his own thing. What he's about to do is God's will. period. And he wants the people, and that's the only reason he's praying. He already knows that this is the Father's will. That's why he went there to resurrect them, right? But he wants the people. He's praying for the sake of the people so that they can understand that this is coming from God the Father too. It's his will. And so verse 43, when he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips and face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." See, the Lord commanded it, and it was his will, so the dead man came out. See, now think about that. Think about that. Divine power from Jesus not only stopped the decay in this corpse, it gave it new life, new organs. It started a bloodless, decomposing heart again. Fresh new blood flowing through again. New tissue, new nerves, new vision, new eyesight. How did that happen? Let alone how he got the brain going again. People say that, Lazarus maybe lived another 30 years. And of course, he had to die again, right? But think about the power of God to bring a dead man that's decomposing from the dead right then and there. Such a powerful thing. We are so frail, and he is so powerful. And he showed it to them. I am the resurrection and the life now, not just later. You need me in your life now. Notice the two instructions to the people. Because, listen, resurrection, new life, only God can do that. See, because all of us here represent people that we know are dying, are frail without Christ. They don't know Christ. They don't know the power of the resurrection. See, and the thing is, we pray. And we want people to know Christ, right? For those of us that he's raised up. But you can't raise people. We can't resurrect anybody. God has to do it. See, that's why sometimes I think we do too much. Because we're trying to raise people. We can't do that. We don't have the power to do that. Only God has the power to do that. But I tell you what, there's two instructions to the people that were there that I think are for us. There was two instructions to the people there at Lazarus' resurrection. It was roll away the stone. The people came and rolled away the stone for Jesus. And then he said, when he came out, take off the grave clothes off of him. Let him loose. See, how does that play out for us in our ministry, in Young Life? We go to the schools. These kids come from broken homes. A lot of them, they don't know Christ. They're going to end up in the wrong path. We do clubs. We gather them together. And we have fun with them. We do certain things. Then one of us leaders comes and talks about the most important person in our life. The one that changed my life. That's able to change your life. And then we share Christ. And we roll away the stone. Because when you roll away a stone like that and you make the effort to be involved in people's lives that right now don't know Christ, listen, they can hear his voice and they could respond to it. You're rolling away the stone and God's speaking to them. See, why those cards for you to bring people to Easter? Because you're using what God gave you, your relationships, at your job, in your family, wherever you're at. And you know people need resurrection life. And you want to bring them to a place where they might be able to hear who Jesus is. You're rolling away the stone. And then there's some young people that want to know more. And they're like, hey, tell me more, man. I want this new life. I don't want to live the way I'm living. I need something more. Tell me more. And then some people come to faith and say, yes, I want this. And then you walk with them. And then you live life with them. And then you see some death on them still. and you see some sin, and it's like, hey, I thought you left that already. Hey, take off the grave clothes. Take that off. See, why do Christians live in community? Because I could be walking in sin, I could be doing the wrong thing, and I justify it and think that I'm okay. So I keep plugging all along, right? And I'm being deceived, and I think I'm okay. But I'm not experiencing life and the power of God and the joy of God and the blessing of God. I'm not enjoying it, but I'm wondering why. Because there's somebody around you, if you live in community, that could say, bro, you got to let that go. That's death right there. Take off those great clothes. See, we're in the ministry, and there's instructions for us here. We can't produce resurrection life. Only God can do that. But there's things we can do. And we got to pray. We got to pray. All right. Look at. By the way, the fill-in there, and for the second fill-in, we obey and serve while God alone resurrects. We obey and serve while God alone resurrects. Let's keep reading. I'm on verse 45. Don't get nervous in the service. This is the last portion. This is the last portion here. Okay? Look at verse 45. These are the responses, guys. These guys saw the resurrection. They saw that dead man come out with new eyesight, new everything, new organs, right? Okay, how did they respond to that? Well, it's right here. Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary, had seen what he did and believed in him. That's a good response right there. I'll come back to that. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Do you think those guys had good motives? Pharisees and the religious leaders already wanted to take Jesus out. They went to go snitch on him. You would think these guys just saw this huge miracle. They would fall on their knees right then and there. Or if they're going to go tell the religious people, they're going to say, man, this is the man. This is the Messiah. I don't care what you guys have been saying. This is he. This is what he did. But I don't think these guys are saying that. Okay? Look at what it continues to say. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, what are we to do? For this man performs many signs. This is his worst enemies, saying, this guy does all kinds of miracles. We can't stop it. And these are the people that hated him. But they have to acknowledge that it was true. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. Do you understand that the religious people were trying to make it a noble thing? Hey, we got to get rid of this guy because he's going to ruin the status quo, and the Romans are going to come and take away everything that we have, and it's going to affect all the people. Do you see how they're trying to make it a noble cause? But they had their own evil intentions, right? But one of them, Caiaphas, right, the high priest, said to them, you know nothing at all, you big dummies. Like, what's wrong with you? Remember, they've been trying to kill him already, right? Caiaphas is tired of it. He said, let's get it done now. We've been talking about this. Let's get it done now. But little did they know, it was God's purpose for Jesus to die that Passover anyway. Do you see people plot evil things and God is always going to win out? Look at what it says on verse 50. Nor do you understand that it's better for you that one man should die for the people and not that the whole nation should perish. He did not say this on his own accord. God spoke through this evil man, guys, because he prophesied. Not that the whole nation should perish. He did not say this on his own accord, but being the high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation. And not only for the nation, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So from that day on, they made plans to put him to death. Hey, we're going to get this done. So that's a reaction. It's a hostile reaction. Jesus, therefore, no longer walked openly. He became a fugitive. Israel's most wanted. He was a wanted man. He had to go to the wilderness. Look at what it says. Therefore, Jesus, therefore, no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there to the region near the wilderness to a town called Ephraim, probably like 12 miles north. And there he stayed with the disciples. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, okay, because this is a week and a half later is when he comes and resurrects from the dead himself after Lazarus. Okay, so the Passover is at hand. And many who went up from the country of Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. Some people, there were some early birds that came to Jerusalem to do some cleansings before the actual Passover. And look they're all gossiping, right? They were all looking for Jesus, saying to one another as they stood in the temple, what do you think? That he will not come to the feast at all? You think he's going to come? Now, look at verse 57, the last verse. Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should let them know so that they might arrest him. As soon as whoever sees him first, grab him, he's done. That's the order. Now, obviously, it's decision time, right? It's decision time. And we see the religious leaders that they are hostile. Why are they so hostile? Well, they're trying to paint it like it's a noble cause, right? Oh, we're the ones that can keep the status quo. We're the ones that can please Rome so they don't disrupt everything. We're the ones that are the brainiacs, the ones that have the whole operation under control. If Jesus comes in, he's going to blow everything up, and the Romans are going to come, and we lose everything. You see how they're making it a noble cause? Now, Jesus never said anything against Rome. He always said, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. That's what he said. He was only interested in people's souls. He wasn't trying to come against Rome. It was a false accusation. But you know why they did it? You know why they did it? Because he was a big obstacle to their own power, their own popularity, and their own theology. They were threatened by Jesus. And that's why he became Israel's most wanted. Because they were afraid of that. They were so insecure. But there's a final group. You got the believers. You got the hostile ones. By the way, the last fill-in, what Jesus did begs for a response, right, on the miracle. And there were three that I could see. A, belief. B, hostility. And C, I wrote people-pleasing. Because that last group, I think about them, and I'm like, man, you're more concerned with what the Pharisees think than your own souls. You're more concerned with keeping the status quo than your own soul. You know that this is true. You know that Jesus is true. You know that everything he says is right. And you're just going to practice your religion and keep doing the same status quo stuff. And by doing that, you're going to end up pushing Jesus away. Why? How do I know that? Because a week later, when he comes in, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. People remembered resurrecting Lazarus. It hadn't happened that long, a few days before. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. 5 days later, crucify him. The same people that were saying Hosanna said, crucify him. Pilate went into his quarters to talk to his wife during the judgments. The wife said, don't touch this innocent man. I had a very disturbing dream about him. Pilate doesn't even want to do anything to Jesus because he knows he's completely innocent. He knows the Pharisees and the religious leaders are just trying to get him out of pride and out of envy. And yet the Pharisees had so much pull in these people's lives that they went around to the crowd while Pilate was still in backstage, and they convinced the people, this can't be your Messiah. Look at him. Look at, he's bloody. He's in the hands of Rome. That's not your Messiah. And they convinced the people. And why did the Pharisees have such influence? Because they ruled the synagogues all over Israel. So if you didn't do the right thing and you weren't in the right standing with Pharisees, you could be unsynagogued. You would lose a lot of, your work, your ability to work and different things. So why did they people please? See? And when you people please, what happens is you end up rejecting Jesus because you never committed yourself to him. And so it's an important thing to do. Now, with that, God's purposes are always done. See, you got people that oppose, that are hostile to Jesus. You got people that are people pleasers, playing a religious game, but not really doing what Jesus said. Okay, but then the third group are the believers. See, because on verse 51 and 52, he did not say this of his own accord, but being the high priest, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, not only for the nation, but also to gather the children of God who are scattered abroad. See, they meant it for evil, what they were trying to do to Jesus, and God turned it around for good because he had to go die on that cross anyway. I want us to prepare our hearts for communion this morning. After I pray, communion elements will be there. But let me just finish off with these final thoughts. Like I said, regardless of the people's plans and responses, in verse 51 and 52, we see God's will. See, Jesus came to die in order to gather his children of God. In Genesis 50, do you remember what Joseph said to his brothers? He said, hey, you guys meant it for evil, but God turned it around for good. You guys did evil things to me, but God used it for good. That's what God always does. He turns it around. He came into his own, but his own did not receive him. But to those that received him, to those that believed in his name, he gave them the right to become children of God. Born not of the will of the flesh, had nothing to do with humanity, but born of the will of God. Those are the children of God. They've been given the right to be children of God. I know a man, like Paul would say in some of his scriptures, not that I ever seen the third heaven because I didn't, but I know a man, speaking of myself, who one day, because I always felt like I knew things, I always felt like I can get out of things and figure it out. I always felt that way. Even when I was a drug addict and a drug dealer, even at my worst, I always felt that I knew what I was doing. But there came a point in my life when I heard through the scriptures the voice of the Son of God, the one who can raise the dead, who says, I'm the resurrection and the life. I heard his voice. And I came forth because I was dead. I was dead. Oh, yeah, I put up a front like I knew what I was doing, but inside I was dead. I was done. And I gave my life to Christ. For now on, Lord, if you can give me a new life, give it to me, God. I'm ready to do what you say. I'm ready to go where you want me to go. I'm ready to do what you want me to do. This is not my life anymore. It's yours. I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who lives. It's Christ who lives in me. And the life that I now live in this flesh is by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. See, I gave my life to Christ 2006. And he filled me with his Spirit. And he gave me resurrection life. And I've been preaching ever since. But he gives power because he's the resurrection and the life now. Not just later, now. And that power is available to you and I right now. And so as we go into communion, if you haven't done that and you haven't given your life completely to God, today's the day. Today's the day of salvation. Don't harden your heart like in the rebellion. Today is the day of salvation. See, and if you've already been resurrected like myself in the past, hey, maybe you got some grave clothes. And maybe you got to surrender that to Christ so that you can live in resurrection power. Because resurrection power is available to you. Let me pray and let's commune together. Once again, Lord, thank you so much for everything you do for us. And thank you for reminding us, God, once again, that we're frail, we're weak, but you're strong. And your power is made perfect in our weakness. And so, Lord, as we commune together, we offer you our weakness. And we're asking for your resurrection. As they commune with you, as they talk to you, open their ears, God. Open their heart and speak into their hearts, into their ears, and raise them up, God. Raise them up into new life and into purpose. Thank you for everything you do, God. Pour out your Spirit, pour out your blessing, and be with us the rest of our worship time, God. In Jesus' name, amen.